I am very happy to welcome Representative Jamie Becker-Finn to our committee. And I believe that the bill that she has today, House File 336, is also a way to talk about equity in transportation. And she will explain why. And this bill, relating to driver's licenses and revocations is important. We have heard this bill in the past, members. It has had a Republican lead author at one time. It has had a Democratic lead author. It is one of the, I don't know, Representative Becker-Finn, if this may be one of the only bills in the country that is supported by ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, as well as the Southern Poverty Law Center. So there is a lot of bipartisan support, and I think people who would consider themselves conservatives and liberals and others would support this bill. So what we're going to do, members, is I will move that House File 336 be re-referred to the Committee on Public Safety. We will have Representative Becker-Finn offer her introduction and comments about the bill. She has a couple of testifiers. Then we will get into a conversation about the fiscal note for this bill. We'll have member questions and discussion. And it's my intention then, before we adjourn, to move this bill on to public safety. Representative Becker-Finn, welcome to the committee. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an author's amendment, and that addressed concern that in the way that the legislative process is supposed to work, that was brought to our attention. And I don't know if you want to move that now or you want to do it after the testimony.
I will. Let's get the bill in the shape that you, as the author, would like to have our committee take a look at it in. Why don't you, Representative Becker-Finn, Chair Becker-Finn, explain your oral amendment, and we'll adopt it.
I think it's the A4 amendment. I think we met deadline in getting that in. Maybe I'm mistaken.
Does everyone have a copy of the A4 before you? Okay.
Yes.
Thank
Frank,
you.
did we move Frank? This is Representative
Yeah,
Nelson.
I'll move the A4 amendment.
Did we move the bill, original bill?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Representative Chair Becker-Finn.
Yep. So the A4 amendment, essentially, it was brought to our attention that there was an impact on some federal funds, and we just wanted to make sure that it has to do with the non-resident violator compact, which was not a compact I was even aware of previously, but this language would help the bill so it's still in compliance with those requirements, and so that we are not missing out on the chance at those federal dollars. So not controversial, just cleaning some stuff up.
Members, we're going to take a voice vote to incorporate the A4 amendment, which has been moved into the bill. All those in favor of the A4 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion prevails.
Frank, you muted yourself.
Sorry about that. The motion prevails. We have House File 336 before us as amended, and you can proceed, Chair Becker-Finn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just give you a brief overview for folks who aren't already familiar with this effort. So essentially, what we're trying to do is make it so that when people are having their driver's licenses suspended, that it isn't for reasons that have to do with actual public safety. What happens is that there are actually around 20,000 Minnesotans who have their driver's licenses suspended for things like failure to pay fines or failure to appear. And what that does, and this is where it gets really to the equity piece, is it's disproportionately making it so that people are not licensed, and then they can't they can't get to work, they can't live their lives and do things safely. And so what we know is that low income folks are much more disproportionately impacted by the current system. And so what this bill does is some of those petty misdemeanor type things would no longer be reasons that people would have their driver's licenses suspended on their own. And it's actually it is one of those bills in our public safety or in a judiciary committee, in my committee, we do have a lot of issues like this where there is bipartisan agreement and it's not a hyper partisan issue. But this in particular, we have support from the Minnesota County Attorneys Association, the state bar, as well as the public defenders and many, many others. This is an ongoing effort by a broad group of people to get this moving forward. And really what the idea is to allow people to continue to drive legally so that they can continue to support their families, so they can get to work safely without violating the law when their license is taken away for something that falls in that kind of petty misdemeanor level type of issue. I do have a couple testifiers and I would like to give more time to them if that's okay with the chair.
Yes, please, Chair Becker-Finn, I think you have Mary Ellen Heng and Camille Bryant, and if they could come forward and please state their names for our record and proceed with their testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mary Ellen Heng. I am the Deputy City Attorney of the Criminal Division in the Minneapolis City Attorney's Office. I have been a misdemeanor prosecutor for 23 years. And so I'm very familiar with the driving status offenses that we're talking about here, primarily driving after suspension. My office, and in conjunction with the St. Paul City Attorney's Office, we've partnered with them on this legislation in the past. We support this bill for a variety of reasons. For the past, just to give you a sense, my office in Minneapolis, we prosecute about 15,000 misdemeanor cases a year. So we have a hefty caseload. The last few years, our caseload numbers for driving after suspension have averaged around anywhere between 400 and 1,000 cases a year. And those are just the cases that come into court. There are hundreds, if not thousands more citations where people don't set them for court, that they're out there. This is simply not how I want my staff to be spending their time. As Chair Becker-Finn said, we want to focus on cases that impact public safety. And for a lot of these cases, these drivers, while they're driving on a suspended license, they are pulled over because law enforcement runs their plate and sees that their license is suspended. They have not committed a traffic violation. They're driving safely within the rules. But for the status of their license, they're not a public safety risk on the roads. And many of these individuals simply lack the resources to pay the fines either within the prescribed time that causes them to be suspended. And so what we're not talking about is ending the suspension or revocation, rather, for people that are committing serious offenses like DWIs, driving without insurance, people that are repeat speeders. If you get enough petty misdemeanors, your license is revoked. We're not talking about people doing that type of behavior. Those fall in the public safety category that I want to spend my time on. What we're focusing on are individuals who simply cannot afford to pay their tickets, or at least pay them in bulk at the time the court wants them, and therefore they lose their privileges to drive simply because of their lack of finances. As you're all aware, the last 10 months have been very challenging for the court system, and we have essentially seen the court system shut down for the most part. And right now we're trying to recover, as is the whole world, from the pandemic and the impacts, and we're slowly opening the courts up, and we do not need to prioritize these type of cases. We have a backlog of domestic assaults, DWIs, other serious offenses we need to come to court. And so the pandemic adds a new layer to this that we didn't have even last year when we were talking about this bill. And from my perspective as a prosecutor, having people out there with suspended licenses, it also means most likely they don't have insurance. And that is what makes it unsafe on the roads for our community members. We want licensed, insured drivers following the law on the roadways. And as Chair Becker-Finn said, this often then leads to other unintended consequences that end up on my caseload. If they can no longer drive, maybe they lose their job. That leads them to lose their housing. And then we see them committing offenses such as trespassing, shoplifting, other things that are all tied into the larger issue. So I think this bill fits in really well with what we've been talking about for the last year and beyond, at least in Hennepin County for sure, the disparities in the system. How can we do better? And this is definitely one of them. And I know you're going to be talking about the fiscal note. The only other thing I'd like to add on that is I know that there will be a fiscal, impact if these citations are no longer in the system, but my thought is we have to find a way to fund programs and departments without funding it on the backs of the individuals being cited. Law enforcement was criticized for writing tickets to fund their departments. This is really no different. And the courts need to be funded separately. DPS needs to be funded separately. To rely on reinstatement fees and court fines is not fair to the individuals. And when it's not right for law enforcement, it shouldn't be right in other situations. So thank you for considering this bill. We've been trying for several years to get it passed. I'm hoping this will be the year. But like I said, we're fully in support of this. And once Ms. Bryant has testified, I'm certainly willing to take any questions.
Thank you. I see Representative Petersburg's hand raised. Representative Petersburg, did you have a question for the testifier or for the author?
Final bill, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. All right, we'll call on you first, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you.
So we have two more testifiers that have signed up, Ms. Camille Bryant and Ismael Dore. So if you all, Ms. Bryant, I'll call you first, and then welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you very much. My name is Camille Bryant. I work as a public defender in Hennepin County. I've practiced as a public defender here for 13 years. In order to qualify for a public defender, a client must make no more than $15,613 a year if they're single, or $32,188 for a family of 4. Based on the average incomes in Minneapolis, this includes PCAs, waitresses, janitors, grocer, and daycare workers. Those are my clients. To help put it in context, the average cost of rental housing in Minneapolis is roughly $19,000 per year. I have represented persons charged with felonies, but for the past 2 years, I've been representing people charged solely with misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors. I normally have multiple clients with more than 10 unresolved driving after suspension cases. Not unusual to see people with as many as 24 cases. I rarely have felony clients with a string of driving after suspension cases. I just didn't see them when I was doing felonies. For each of these cases, there's a fine, there's a late charge, there's a reinstatement fee, and if I have them as a client, there's a court surcharge for them having the services of a public defender. Until those charges are paid, clients can't get their license valid. The first question I get asked when I have a client in court is, are they valid? If they're not valid, they get referred to a program, DDP, driver diversion program, or another to help them get valid, which means at least an additional court appearance, often 2 or 3, because of the backlog and the time it takes to get through the program. At least one of the driver's programs that's out there, Driving with Pride, actually leaves my clients worse off than they were if they had just paid the tickets on their own. When I look collectively at my clients' tickets and the corresponding police reports, common trends emerge. The first is that it's not unusual for multiple tickets to have been issued around the same time of day, on the same stretch of road, by the same police officer over a period of time. My clients that I have with those drivers after suspension cases are almost always Black men. And there are always stops that are initiated because the police ran their plates opposed to some additional driving behavior. These tickets set my clients on a set of indebtedness to the state. It puts them in the challenging position of knowingly breaking the law in order to drive to and from work, or not to work, or to have to change jobs, or to have to find additional options for childcare. And it disproportionately affects Black men. My question to you is, are these the outcomes that you intend in these laws? And if they aren't, then the laws need to be changed.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Our next testifier is Ismael Dore, and please state your name for the record. Welcome to the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ismael Dore. Today I'm proud to be here as an organizer with the ACLU of Minnesota, but my journey here was difficult. I want to share my story so you'll know how important it is to end this hazardous practice. You see, I know the impact of excessive fines and fees and driver's license suspensions all too well. Several years ago, I got some traffic tickets, but I had no money to pay for them. I was experiencing my first phase of homelessness, trying to get on my feet to take another year of college, and I was living out of my 1999 Nissan Altima. And literally everything I owned was in my car. One day I parked my car in downtown Minneapolis. When I came back, it was gone. I found out the city had towed it. I continuously went down to the impound lot to get my car back, but the amount of money I owed went up every day. I wasn't allowed to retrieve any of my belongings. There was a deadline for me to get my car back, which I didn't know about. The day I finally made enough money to, get my car out of the impound lot, I found out that the city had sold it. I had reached the deadline. I lost my laptop, my birth certificate, my passport, all my clothes, plus stuff I could never replace, like art and jewelry that were gifts from family members in Africa. I was doing the best I could being homeless and living out of a car, but losing my car really put me in a state of desperation because now I really had nothing. The things fell apart for me. I was flat broke. It was a cold Minnesota winter. Long story short, I ended up incarcerated. And during that time is when I learned, officially that my license was suspended. I had my speculations, but during that time, I reached out to multiple counties to try to figure something out, really to pay off my fees concurrently, as I was already serving a debt to society. It only worked partially. Not all counties accepted my request, and I still ended up owing a lot. So after I was released, I didn't have money to start paying off traffic fines and fees. They weren't really a priority. I'm fresh out, trying to get my stuff together. I'm not thinking about paying fees from traffic tickets from years ago. I'm thinking about how am I going to get established. I knew I had to find a job, get some income, but by this time I was living in Little Canada, which is a suburb of St. Paul, and there's not much public transit out that way. And back against the wall, feeling stuck, I felt like to get to work, I felt as if I had no choice but to drive anyway. And in the long run, I just ended up with more tickets for driving with a suspended license than the initial number of traffic tickets that I even had to begin with. Now I'm on a payment plan. I got my license back. I'm paying those fines and fees plus reinstatement fees. There's also a special insurance, mind you, that the DVS will require you to purchase in order to even get your license back, which is also really expensive. It's called an SR22, and all of this is costing me thousands of dollars. These state laws really need to be looked at. If a law doesn't benefit the community, it shouldn't be a law anymore. I believe judges should be allowed to waive fines and fees on a case-by-case basis. The state definitely should stop suspending licenses because people can't pay for traffic tickets. Suspending licenses only creates more problems. It doesn't make someone pay their fines or fees any quicker. If they don't have money, it's just going to send them deeper into a deeper cycle of debt. It's time to give these people a second chance, really, especially those who are less fortunate, instead of being driven deeper into a cycle of poverty. And I know firsthand how hard it is to get out of that. And I'm still dealing with some of the effects to this day. So yeah, that's my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dore, for your powerful words and testimony. Very much appreciated. Members, I see Representative Heinrich and Representative Barr's hands are up. Did you have questions for the testifiers, or did you want to speak towards the end like Representative Petersburg? Happy to accommodate you either way.
Mr. Chair.
Passage, Mr. Chair.
Representative Heinrich.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I do have a question for Prosecutor Mary Ellen Hang.
You can proceed, Representative Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all the testifiers. I just thought this one would be a good question for the prosecutor. Just more of kind of out of curiosity, what is the threshold, like for example, on for miles per hour over the speed limit where it does trigger that mandatory court date? Maybe that specific, or what on the road? I know DWI would probably be a mandatory in front of the judge. But at what point does this affect any of those? Like if you have to show up before a judge, if that's a part of that citation, and then you don't show up for a judge, can you still get a revocation or a suspension at that point? I guess that's my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Heinrich. Ms. Heng.
Thank you, Representative Heinrich, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Yes, that's a great question. As far as the speeding, the officer has discretion based on the amount that you're traveling over the speed limit. They can cite you for speeding and then cite you for the miles per hour over. And those are petty misdemeanors that are what we call payable offenses. You're not required to come to court on those. And what happens is if you don't respond to that citation, any petty misdemeanor moving violation, if you fail to respond, what happens now are two things. That ultimately, after a certain period of time, a conviction is going to be entered on that offense, and then it's going to be certified to your driving record. So it will impact your driving record, and eventually, if you have enough moving violations in a certain amount of time, you will be revoked for your bad driving behavior. Right now, the other impact is that fine needs to be paid, and then it also adds that additional layer of if you don't pay off the fine associated with that ticket, you will also be suspended. You can have your status both revoked and suspended, even canceled, all at the same time for different instances. So this wouldn't impact that. What I have seen in my experience is when individuals are traveling, usually 30 plus more over the speed limit, the troopers, usually it's troopers on the freeways, we see the speed, but they often will check the endanger box on the citation or cite them for careless driving. Once an officer does either of those things, it requires a mandatory court appearance. And it turns that into a case where you have to come and you have to see me as a prosecutor to resolve your case and a judge. And so that won't be changed by this offense.
Thank you, Ms. Heng. Representative Barr, did you have a question for the testifiers or the author at this point?
Mr. Chair, I had a question for Ms. Bryant.
Okay, Ms. Bryant, if you can proceed, Representative Barr.
Ms. Bryant, during your testimony, you mentioned that some of the people who have been had their license suspended, they're on their way to work and they'll get continually pulled over for having a plate run. How would an officer know? I mean, I'm thinking of the, like in the case of a seatbelt, that went from a what do they call it? A primary offense. You couldn't stop for it, stop somebody even if you saw them, to a primary offense. We changed that. So if you see a car going down the highway and you're running the license plate, you're reading the license plate, not watching who's sitting in the driver's seat. Who do you actually know who's driving it? The car didn't make any problems. It's the driver that's driving without a suspended license. So just pulling a car over because that particular plate happens to, I mean, they could have loaned it to their friend. There's nothing wrong, nothing saying you can't loan your car out. So I'm trying to follow along with that. Could you help me out a little bit, please?
Ms. Bryant.
Well, you're actually absolutely right. That's what the law says, that they can't stop unless they believe that there is the person who matches the description of the registered license driver. But that's a matter of what gets put in the police report. You know, when they fill out the police report, that's what's indicated. And those are challenges that we would have to make on a case-by-case basis. When we get clients in with 24 driving after suspension, we do have the option of going through and selectively legally challenging them. But in terms of efficiency, it tends to work out better for our clients to negotiate them away. But you're right, we would have the option of going through each and every single driving after suspension case to challenge the stop when they're running the plates, because they just run the plates. But that's another avenue where these cases, if we were litigating them to the fullest would clog up our judicial system and would cause even more resources to go towards them and take even longer, especially for our clients who are working really hard to get their licenses back in order to get a job. I had a client a couple of weeks ago who had been going to get his real estate license, and he couldn't use the real estate license because he didn't have a valid driver's license. Like, they were pieces of the program that required it. And so for him, what was most important is, let's hurry up and get this done, because I don't have time to keep coming back to court. I don't have time to go for a trial, even if I think that the police were inappropriate in stopping me, because he's trying to live his life.
Thank you. Do you have a very quick follow-up, Representative Barr? We want to get to the fiscal note conversation.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. Ms. Bryant, could you just contact me? I'd like to talk more about that offline, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate that. Members, we have a fiscal note for this bill, and it's a little different than previous fiscal notes related to this. And of course, we have new members, and maybe the previous members may not recall the fiscal piece of this bill. So I'm going to call on Mr. Lee from House Fiscal Analyst for the Transportation Committee to very briefly explain the fiscal note, and he can entertain any questions from members about it. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Again, for the record, my name is Andrew Lee from House Fiscal staff. Fiscal notes are prepared by the executive branch. So in this case, the agency that has relevance to the Transportation Committee is the Department of Public Safety. And a fiscal note is an estimate of the potential impact of proposed legislation. So if members could turn to, they should have received a fiscal note in the committee packet. I'll give you a second to look for that. But there's two pieces of this fiscal note, one that applies to the Department of Public Safety and one that applies to the Supreme Court. The Department of Public Safety is within the committee's purview, so I'll be talking about that section. There's two pieces of this fiscal note. If you go to the second page when you have a chance, there is an estimated fee revenue loss and then an expenditure by the Department of Public Safety. The fee revenue loss applies to the general fund and the driver and vehicle service account of the special revenue fund. So very briefly, if you go down to page 4, the Department of Public Safety lays out their assumptions for how they estimate the fee loss as a result of fines not being paid for the failure to appear or driving while suspended or driving while revoked fees. And those assumptions are on page 4 and page 5. And in summary, the loss of general fund revenue as a result of the estimated loss of general fund revenue would be about $324,000 a year from the general fund starting in FY 2022, and about $208,000 to $218,000 to the driver services account. There's also a very small agency expenditure to comply with the law, and that is detailed on the bottom of page 5. Essentially, the agency estimates that they would need some programming costs for the driver services system, which would cost about $56,000, and they believe that they can do that cost with existing appropriations, so they're not requesting an appropriation for that. An additional approximately $9,700 for mailing out notices that essentially people would be eligible for license reinstatement. And then the next few pages are an explanation of the Supreme Court portion of the note, but I'll leave it there in case members have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And members, this bill will wind up, it's traveling separately as of now. It will go to the Ways and Means Committee. It will be held there until we get a target for transportation later on in March, because this does have that general fund impact. So we have, I think, 4 or 5 members of this committee on Ways and Means, so that will be discussed there. Are there any questions of Mr. Lee? Let me see here.
I can ask the question of him,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
I see Representative Mason very quickly, Representative Mason, because we'd like to get to a vote, and Representative Petersburg, I will allow if you wanted to make some final comments. Representative Mason, you're muted, Representative Mason. There you go. Okay, we can hear you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lee, I just want to clarify. So that agency is counting on money from people that will get tickets. It's not something that they really are entitled to or normally would get, but they're banking that people are going to disobey or get tickets. Am I understanding that right?
Mr. Lee.
Mr. Chair and Representative Mason, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mason. Representative Petersburg, would you like to make any closing comments or have a question?
Yeah, one quick comment and then the question of Mr. Lee. Just coincidentally, our daughter was coming to pick up our grandson at our apartment complex. I stay up here at St. Paul, and she was involved with an accident from an individual that had no driver's license and no insurance. Probably an indicator that it was very similar to what we're talking about today. My question to Mr. Lee is that on page 5 of those assumptions, there were 2 concerns that they have. I believe the amendment that we have took care of at least one of those. Did it take care of the one in regards to the federal CDL license interactions? Because I think that's dealt with by federal law as well. So was that excluded with this amendment as well, if you know that answer?
Mr. Chair and Representative Petersburg, I think I might want to defer to either my colleague Matt Burris at House Research or the Department of Public Safety for that question.
Yeah, I saw Mr. Burris pop in here, so you can unmute Mr. Burris, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Mr. Chair and members, Matt Burris with House Research. That second issue regarding disqualifications for commercial driver's license holders is not addressed by the amendment. There have been some additional conversations at the staff level and with Representative Becker-Finn and DPS. So that's a piece that's in progress, I guess you might say.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. And I know Chair Becker-Finn, you have your hand up, and if you wanted to make any closing comments or if you had a question of staff, I don't know if you wanted to proceed now or just at the end.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. And on the CDL piece, we're working that out. It was something that was brought up late, and I can commit to members that will continue to make sure, that's obviously not the intent to screw up anything else, and is, part of the committee process to make sure we're getting this right. As far as the fiscal note, I do want to note that this bill gets to the broader impact of criminalizing behavior that doesn't actually impact public safety. And what happens is when we get folks on this path, the greater actual economic cost to individual people and families and our state, when people get on this path to, multiple contacts with the system and losing housing and their jobs and everything like that, that I know those are not things that are contemplated always in fiscal notes, but I think it's a very important part of this conversation and sort of the value of moving this piece of legislation forward. So thank all the members who've already signed on in support, and we'll continue to work to make sure this bill is as good as it can be.
Thank you. And Representative, thank you so much for that, Chair Becker-Finn. Representative Petersburg, just wanted to make sure that your concern or question about the CDLs was answered.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure that it got addressed before it goes on to the next level. I know it has made a couple of stops, so I trust I just was bringing up, make sure that we didn't miss it. And I think that the bill is worthy of its passage. I know of so many people that say once their license is revoked, they have no consequence to really keep driving. So this is important for us to have somebody that can also have insurance as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other comments, Chair Becker-Finn? And then we'll proceed to take a roll call vote as required by rule on this bill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just thank you for hearing the bill and thank folks for their questions. It's incredibly important to many, many Minnesotans, and I appreciate members' support.
Thank you, Chair Becker-Finn. So members, I'm going to renew my motion that House File 336 as amended be re-referred to the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform, Finance, and Policy. Mr. Dodge, if you will take the roll.
Chair Hornstein,
Hornstein votes aye.
Eagle,
Mr. Dodge, we're having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if you can adjust your audio for the roll call, please.
is this better, Mr. Chair?
Much better. Okay, so why don't we take it from the top, Mr. Dodge?
Okay, Chair Hornstein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cagle,
Aye.
Representative Petersburg,
Aye.
Representative Barr,
Aye.
Representative Bernardi,
Aye.
Representative Elkins,
Aye.
Representative Frederick,
Aye.
Representative Hausman,
Aye.
Representative Heinrich,
Aye.
Representative Kosnick,
Aye.
Representative Mason,
Aye.
Representative Murphy,
Aye.
Representative Nelson,
Aye.
Representative Olson,
Aye.
Representative Richardson,
Aye.
Representative Torkelson,
Aye.
Representative West.
Aye.
There are 17 ayes and 0 nays.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge, and thank you very much, Chair Becker-Finn. You are now on your way to Public Safety, Criminal Justice Reform, Finance, and Policy, and we wish you good luck with your bill and appreciate your testifiers and your work on this very important bill. Members, we will be reconvening on Tuesday at our usual time. We'll have a presentation on climate and transportation. And then a week from today, we'll be hearing a number of bills that are, several different bills, including from our own committee member, Representative Petersburg, and then a couple from Representative Elkins, and then other members. So be prepared a week from today to hear a number of bills and then talk about transportation and climate and clean cars on Tuesday. With that, members, this meeting is adjourned.